actually actively work to be an anti-racist, to dismantle things, to put your own capital on the line, whether it's political or economic, to share what you have and to make equality be not just a phrase but a reality. There's no question these two things intersect with each other, whether it's the way that we had to close down testing centers today, and I hope that doesn't lead to a little bit more spread, or the way that we are asking protesters to exercise their rights while not causing unsafe situations, not just in the immediacy, but in the face of COVID-19. But I will say this last thing on this question. I do believe in Los Angeles. We aren't defined by the moments where we set out to do the things we want to do. We are defined at the moments by how we respond to the things we don't want to happen. We didn't want COVID-19 to happen, but you've already shown who you are and what this city of angels is about. This is our second test, a test not to retreat from the demands of justice, but also not to push forward with the destruction of a city. We are not at a place where we see Los Angeles returning to where we were 20, 30 years ago, but our work remains unfinished. And if you can hold both of those, you can hold and get through this moment, and especially to our young people who weren't even alive in 1992, I want to say, your hearts are broken, and ours are too. You should demand change, but change comes not just on the street. Have you filled out your census form? Because if you're not counted, you're erased by this government, and the funding doesn't come for the programs that would change this. Have you registered to vote? Because if you're not out there voting, your voice not only is not heard, but you may have leadership that isn't just your ally, but as hostile and your enemy. Are you going out there each and every day to help erase whether the gender inequities that we have, or to embrace our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, to look at our Native brothers and sisters who suffer at as deep a level as our African American brothers and sisters? This is what this moment should bring us to. Not just the scream, but the next day, the joining of hands together and figuring out how we walk as one.
Can you say which testing centers were closed?
All of them were closed as of 3 o'clock in the city of Los Angeles.
And why was that decision made?
Because of the safety worries across the city.
You mentioned the curfew is limited to downtown because it's a big city, and so there are different parts of the city that have different responses. Why is the response to close testing centers citywide if the curfew is not citywide?
Well, two different things. The curfew downtown is one which we need to clean up the streets, take away things that right now are dangerous, board up our businesses so don't see people looting till 4:30 in the morning like we saw last night, and dangerous situations where business owners and looters may come into conflict with each other. We need to reestablish that right here. Other parts of the city I believe in, and I believe that we can step back from the situation that we see at Fairfax. If we see other ones, have quick responses to make sure we're not going to stand for the burning of police cars. We're not going to stand for people who destroy shop windows. Those very few people who want the fight, whether you're a protester, a police officer, or somebody watching on TV, none of us should stand for that. All of us should condemn it, and all of us should support making sure that those people are brought to justice too. There's a much bigger call for justice that we need, and that is the one that we should keep our eyes focused on, not lighting up a police car as a way of making a point.
To circle back to what's going on now, there have been various reports of less lethal munitions, rubber bullets, or beanbags being deployed. Things seem pretty tense. What is your understanding of not only the tactics being used, but the situation at hand right now?
I came in here as I saw that happen, and the chief, I said, go there right now and go take care of that situation. So while I've been talking to you, I don't have the latest of that. I'm sure people watching have more recent information. But as always, look, as I said, policing is immensely difficult to do. Police officers are attacked, they are faced with force, and using non-lethal force is an option. But I hope for all of us, we can get to a place where we move past that, we protect protest, we make sure that it's peaceful, and that's not even a question we need to ask. I know last night, in other cities and other places, police officers would not have had the restraint that we did. And you know what? It's right that we did. It's good that we did. It's the result of a lot of hard work that we did. Will we always get it perfect? No. This is difficult work to do. To be there on a skirmish line when someone throws a brick at your head, when you start to bleed as a police officer or break your hand, or as we saw last night, people transported. These are our peace officers. They don't deserve to be attacked, and certainly nobody deserves to be killed in America because they're black. Those things can coexist with each other, and they're not equal. I'm not putting them on equal ground. Obviously, to lose your life is much worse than getting a brick. But people can die right now on the streets of Los Angeles with and without badges. And if we don't recognize that in the same way in this COVID-19 crisis, we said even not wearing a mask can kill somebody, then we are not doing our duty to protect human life. We are saying that human lives are not all sacred. I think I can take one more question.
Moving through now until 8 p.m. when the curfew goes into place in downtown, are you going to be constantly evaluating other situations across the city to perhaps introduce a curfew in other parts of the city later?
Not at this point. I want to be clear. We're not doing this anywhere else but downtown. You can ask it 3 or 4 times. Right now we're not, but we will monitor the entire city. And of course we consider at any given day, when there's a perfectly peaceful day, if something happens, we always have a range of options. Making sure this is a safe city is a #1 priority for me. Making sure this is a just city is an equal priority, but right now when we are in the midst of unsafety, we have to make sure that we are safe. Safe for protesters to exercise their rights peacefully and to make sure their lives are protected, as well as our peace officers and everybody else. And that's what we'll be focused on today, tomorrow. Let us give voice to the pain that we feel, but let us not take that out on our city. We are better than this, Los Angeles. We can prove it, and I know we are a city of angels. With that, let me say a couple words in Spanish as well. Thank you. And
all right,
before
Mayor
I say
Eric
that,
Garcetti wrapping up a news conference as we continue to monitor a protest over the death of George Floyd in the Fairfax district that has turned violent. The mayor asking demonstrators across the city of Los Angeles to take a deep breath and de-escalate. And we actually just want to go right up to Gil Levis, a news shopper for Bravo. And Gil, I believe this is what? This is Television City, CBS Television City. What are you seeing?
It is. In fact, the crowd just busted through the front gates with dumpsters. A couple of dumpsters, they rolled right up to the gates and busted through. The security was doing all they could to prevent them from entering any further. There is LAPD officers in the property here at TV Studios, but you see the security guards were able to secure the gate once again. The crowd made a push for the studios there, but they have now retreated. That's a good thing. They see that there's a response by LAPD within inside the gates. Here they are, task force moving in to protect that gate. Once again, they have moved in, and they're going to secure the gate there for CBS studios there here off of Fairfax and Beverly. But again, once again, the crowd here overtook the LAPD. They retreated from the corner over here at Fairfax and Beverly. They really all the officers jumped on their security vehicles and took off from the area. You see as I push in here another vehicle that has been pretty much destroyed by the crowds, but it is nothing but chaos out here. The LAPD doing what they can. Here's another car that was vandalized right in the intersection. We are seeing that the group has some support. We're seeing some vehicles coming through into the crowds, and they're handing out like bottled water and anything else that they can assist the crowd with. So we're seeing several vehicles throughout the coverage area. I'm going to come up to a wider shot and tilt down to the south here to 3rd and Fairfax, where that city bus was, and the LAPD has cleared that area right now. You see the fire department is staging there as well, and there's a push right now up past the farmers market, up Fairfax here as they push the crowd back towards the north, towards Beverly. So that crowd that was once here, the biggest crowd, has been dispersed, and it looks like they're pushing out back towards CBS studios here off of Beverly and Fairfax. But again, a large group here assembling at that intersection. The police had this cordoned off, but like I said, they evacuated this and retreated from this intersection. There was also a report of an injured officer here just before they retreated. retreated. These people on the corner right here were throwing rocks and bottles at the officers as they were retreating. It was quite chaotic. But again, one injured officer right now is reportedly at Rosewood and Gardner is where that officer is being treated right now for his injuries. It's unknown what type of injuries and how serious those injuries are, but once again, the crowd taking over this intersection.
Yeah, we saw a couple of officers fall from the back of a vehicle, a police vehicle, as they were trying to escape. And all of this as the mayor was live here on TV, calling for calm, asking people to go home, and implementing a mandatory curfew for 8 o'clock tonight until 5:30 in the morning. That's only for the downtown area. He said that he didn't want to expand that. That was mainly to get calm, to restore order, to board up businesses. And as he's talking about that, we're seeing more patrol cars being set on fire. We saw non-lethal rounds being fired at protesters. Protesters answering back with bottles, picking up cones in the street. And then we saw a few grab those large dumpsters and push them down the street. And that's when they ended up there at CBS Studios and made a push for the gate. And it was quite dramatic, Jonathan, as we were watching that, because the guards there were trying to shut the gates. And one of the garbage bins got in, and they just barely got those gates closed.
Yeah, it's incredible. Police got there as fast as they did because this crowd is dispersed in so many different parts of this town. As you see, this area, the Fairfax district, you see right here on your screen, them blasting through the gates, the security guards frantically trying to close them, but they're no match for these protesters pushing those dumpsters in. Again, soon after, we saw several police officers enter the property, make sure that they were safe, that they were able to close those gates. This is a television city here, CBS Television City in the Fairfax district. We don't assume there are a lot of people working, considering the pandemic, considering what's going on right now otherwise, but still, those security guards clearly outmatched. Luckily, the police officers in this area were able to control that situation really quickly, Kathy.
Yeah, frightening, though, for the people who are there, and the mayor making note of that. He's battling not only this, but COVID-19. He had to close testing centers there in the city as of 3 p.m. because they were worried about violence like that. And we have right now a law professor from USC standing by on our phone. This is Jody Armour. We wanted to bring you in, Jody, if you're still there, and get your perspective on this. Obviously, we have people who are very upset to the core about what has happened in Minneapolis and expressing their anger across the nation right now, including here in Los Angeles. How do we put this all into perspective? And thank you for being with us live on the air.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. And we've been, talking about this a long time. I was writing over 20 years ago about these issues, and it seems that in many ways, ain't nothing changed but what year it is, right? We still have a lot of the same debates, controversies, concerns. We've gone through special kinds of sensitivity training for police, implicit bias training, de-escalation training. We've tried just about everything we can imagine, and yet here we are in 2020 again, and we're grappling with many of the same issues again, and makes you wonder, what's next? What are the next kinds of moves that we can make to assuage, to alleviate some of this concern and anger? I heard the mayor talking very eloquently, I thought, about some of the things that we need to have in mind as we are looking at these issues, that the black community in particular is in agony. They are, we are disproportionately bearing the COVID-19 death, and it's ravaging especially through the black community. If you walk through Skid Row in LA, you'll notice that 75% of Skid Row downtown is African American, black. You go into our jails and prisons, you see it's grossly disproportionately black folks are there. So the two most miserable places in our city and in the Southland, Skid Row and our jails and prisons, you see a disproportionate representation of black people, and that means black pain and suffering. And that is part of what's fueling, I think, this frustration. And then the police, concern is an ever-present one. And so I would just say that maybe one of the things that have been that the mayor didn't address. I thought he spoke very eloquently about a lot of issues, so it's about his budget. And, there's been a lot of controversy about the budget. A coalition of community groups and activists helmed by Black Lives Matter has been pushing to slash funding for the LA Police Department in favor of investment in social workers and housing, public transportation, health care. And so I think a lot of people in the black community might say, Mayor, you sound very eloquent when you're talking about these issues, but we really see what your priorities are when we look at your budget. And we wonder about whether those priorities are being reflected in your budget. 54% of the city's unrestricted revenues, a total of about $5.4 billion, is spent on LAPD accounts. And so, there's a little disconnect between some of the mayor's rhetoric and the priorities you see in his, reflected in his budget. And I think that is what a lot of people are looking at and thinking about.
Jody, this is Jonathan Gonzalez. I wanted to ask you about, and thank you for being with us. I wanted to ask you about how this started as a Black Lives Matter protest at Pan Park there in the Fairfax district. Started off peacefully. There's a lot of people we've seen in the last few days trying to pin this when these protests turn violent on Black Lives Matter protesters. But we're also hearing that these protests may be infiltrated by people from the outside. What is your perspective on what you're hearing?
The Black Lives Matter marches and protests that I've seen firsthand have been ones that have been very responsible, and the leadership, the organizers, have been very concerned about making sure that there was an expression of frustration, an expression of the concern that people had, but an expression that didn't spill over into unnecessary violence and wanton destruction of property, etc. And so I think there is a problem sometimes with provocateurs and infiltrators who have agendas that aren't aligned with those of Black Lives Matter, and people who are trying to righteously protest what they view as a kind of persistent and pervasive oppression of black people. So I think that is a real concern, and I think we have to look at these protests not as just one big monolith, but as consisting of sometimes factions and splintering out factions. And I always see, when I've been a part of these marches, the organizers going out of their way to quell and discourage of people who want to come in and escalate unnecessarily, rather than have protests that express the real frustration.
Well, Professor, we value your insight. Thanks for being with us. We'd ask you to hang on the line with us a little bit longer. That's Jody Armour, a law professor at USC, because we want to bring on our own NBC4's Rick Montanez. He has reaction from the organizers of today's demonstrations. Rick.
Yeah, and Kathy, as the professor was talking about, a lot of these demonstrations are set up and they're planned to be peaceful events where people can get out in the streets and voice their opinions on what is going on. I talked with a lot of the organizers today, and they were all organized for a variety of reasons, but in talking with them, there is one theme that they all have in common, and of course that is the treatment for the people of color and for racial and social inequality. Those are the issues that they really want to address. And as we watch these demonstrations here, you're seeing on your screen right now, these are they're unfolding across LA and across the country, and the organizers I talked with today say what is really happening is people are angry, they are fed up, and they are tired. I talked with Sol Marquez just a short time ago. She's with the National Alliance Against Political Repression and Racism in this country, and she says racism is extremely prevalent in this country. The destruction of property is not condoned by a lot of these organizers, these demonstration organizers who are, again, hoping for peaceful events as they head out to the streets. But the buildup of anger and feelings of not being heard by the people in the community, she tells me these are contributors to what we're seeing.
If anybody is angered about private property or corporate property being destroyed, as opposed to someone dying at the hands of police officers who will never suffer any kind of consequences for what they do, then that is a really bad position to take.
Earl Afari Hutchinson is the president of the LA Urban Policy Roundtable. I talked with him today as well. He's written several books.
There is a group of friends of George Floyd holding a news conference right now, including former NBA star Stephen Jackson. Let's listen to some of that.
You all being here. God bless you all.
That's right. Let's go.
Fannie Lou Hamer once said, "We are sick and tired of being sick and tired." And I stand here today exhausted. Black Minnesota, we're done dying. And white Minnesota, you are done hiding. This has been a white Wakanda for far too long, where black bodies drop like flies and nobody does anything. I want to commend Chief Arredondo for taking the right steps and immediately firing those officers. We want to be very clear that we stand with the first African American chief.
That's right.
Now, Mike Freeman, where you at?
That's right.
Because we saw where you were at with Justine DeMond when it was a white woman in South Minneapolis. We saw where you were and how eager you were to charge and prosecute a black Somali Muslim man.
That's right.
Now we want that same justice. We are here reclaiming our time and reclaiming our humanity.
That's right.
Enough is enough. We want all 4 of the officers arrested.
That's right.
And charged. And eventually convicted.
That's right.
Those 4 officers stood, kneeled, and killed George Floyd. All humanity should be outraged. I also want to tell you all, what you're witnessing in Minnesota is something that's been a long time coming. I can't tell you how many governors I've sat down with, how many mayors we've sat down with, and we've warned them that if you keep murdering black people, the city will burn. We have stopped the city from burning numerous times, and we are not responsible for it burning now. Mike Freeman is holding up progress. Poverty and oppression is holding up progress. This is not simply looting, this is an uprising. An uprising of the oppressed people.
That's right.
And we also need to call out that there are many disruptors in the midst.
That's right. Come on, talk about
Media, you need to cover the undercover cops who have been breaking these windows and breaking into businesses. We have images of buildings that have been burnt on fire with specific triangles cut out. These kids are not equipped to do those type of things. So stop painting them out to be monsters. This is your moment where you're trying to create super predators again. We see what you're doing. You're calling in the National Guard. And I got a word to President Trump. And I want to make sure y'all get this word to him. I think that it's crazy that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, COVID-19, and you haven't sent a mask or any resources to the black people in Minnesota. But you were quick to send your troops to kill us? We already been saying it's open season all over the nation, and you just opened it up even more. You were crying, liberate Minnesota when it came to economics, property, and money.
Yeah. Come on, Leslie, talk.
When are you going to tell them to liberate black people in America?
That's right. Come on.
anyone who believes in humanity, we are asking for you to stand up. This is not just a black people issue. This is a human rights issue, and we are pleading with you. Young people, we are standing with you. We want you to know that there's multiple ways to get your point across, and we are here to help you. You have a village that will help you strategize. I know that you are operating out of pain, and since no one else will talk to you, they just keep talking at you and keep referring to you, but I haven't seen one of them on the ground trying to de-escalate any situation. I've been getting tear gas with you, and I haven't thrown a Iraq yet. At some point, it's called defense. And so again, I will say, black Minnesota is done dying. In white Minnesota, you are done hiding. Your white Wakanda has been discovered, and it's time for black people, humanity to be recognized.
That's right. My God.
This is breaking news. Some friends and supporters, including Leslie Resman, the president of the NAACP in Minneapolis, speaking at a news conference right now. Heather?
Africa, let's go!